Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with my next catch-up wrap-up. If you're curious, this is the second and final group of books that I read in March. Yes, that's how behind I am. So let's just go ahead and get into it. I will link the previous wrap-up down below. I'll put content warnings and links to everybody I mention. Also, I wanted to mention that this is the completed blue top that I talked about knitting in my Knits and Bits video. So if you were wondering if I was done with it, I am, and I really like it. I did end up having to do some kind of creative changes around like the sleeve and neck area just because of how some things worked out. So it's not quite to pattern, as the bottom wasn't quite to pattern, but I'm still really happy with it. So anyway, the first book I'm going to talk about today is Not Quite a Ghost by Anne Ursu. This is a middle grade take on the Yellow Wallpaper, which is a classic of psychological horror, a classic of feminist literature. It's a story that I've read several times at this point, and I was so excited and interested to see a middle grade take on this. And I'm gonna tell you, even before I summarize it, that I freaking loved this. It was so good. So we're following our main character Violet, and her family move into this really old house. It's got, you know, a lot of history, a lot of character, but there's also some things that seem kind of off about it, a little bit weird, and they kind of try and like brush it off and everything, but Violet ends up getting the attic bedroom, and there are some things that are extra not right about this room, it seems like. And then seemingly out of nowhere, Violet gets very, very sick. She is like exhausted all the time. Her body is reacting in ways that she doesn't understand. She's really frightened because she doesn't know what's wrong with her, and she's continually going to the doctor, and the doctors are saying like, well, you're fine, so maybe this is just you're upset about stuff. And Violet is having to face like medical gaslighting essentially, like over and over again. Thankfully, she does have people in her corner. Like her family remains supportive even as they're trying to figure out like what's going on with her, and I think that's really important in middle grade books that deal with the kind of reality, you know, that can happen when, you know, like the idea of not being believed by a medical professional unfortunately happens to a lot of people, kids included. And I think that when you're writing for kids, it's especially important to balance out that realism with you know, allies, people being on your side. So anyway, as Violet gets more and more worried about like why she's sick, why nobody believes that she's sick, she's also having difficulties with friends. People feel like she's bailing on them because she cancels plans because she like literally can't move. She starts spending more and more time up in her room, and there's like this really strange thing that seems to be in the wallpaper, like in the room. Yeah, as I said, I thought this was fantastic. I really, really liked the way that Anne Ursu told a story that had a, like, you know, is this supernatural? Like, is there something like speculative going on? Like, it had that element, but at no point did that like bleed into the discussion of Violet's illness, and I really appreciated that. I was hoping that would happen, and I'm glad to see that Anne Ursu was very careful about the way that she wrote the story, the way she told the story, not invalidating these very real like illnesses and disabilities that people have. So I really liked that. I really felt for Violet as a main character. I really liked her, and my heart hurt for her so much, and I really, really admire her, like her strength and her like compassion and her just her cleverness. Like, I just really, really enjoyed her. I was very invested in her and her story. I just liked the characterization in general. I loved her family. They're a blended family, and I really love how that is discussed, how Violet and her little brother, who is I believe a half brother, like they have this really strong, loving relationship, and Violet also has a really wonderful stepdad, and they do have some kind of like figuring out how to navigate their new family together, but for the most part it is a really positive and loving family relationship, and I really like that grounded this book. And just like I said, the characters in general I thought were really well done. Like, in addition to Violet and her family, I think the way that the friendship element was handled was really good and really interesting, and in some ways kind of surprising. It's something that we don't always see in stories like this, and I don't want to get into like spoilery details or anything, but I liked that nuance and that discussion. Also, the creepiness factor of this book I thought was incredibly well done. It doesn't happen, like, it doesn't fully happen until quite a ways into the book, but there is that like building unease and tension and just creepy vibes going on, and then it does get very creepy, I think, right at the end. This is one of the very rare cases where I'm actually glad that the cover does not 100% reflect like what's described in the story, because the cover would have been even freakier if that were the case. I think this stands incredibly well on its own. I definitely don't think you need to be familiar with the Yellow Wallpaper to enjoy this book and to get everything that it's going for. If you have read the original, I think it is so interesting to view this as a retelling. Like, I feel like Anne Ursu takes the, like I talked about this in my Goodreads review, where it's like she's very intentional about the elements of the original story that she keeps or that she inverts or, you know, changes in some way. And this story is specifically a lot about invisible illnesses and disabilities and not being believed about that, but it's still sort of in tandem with the commentary of the original, which I just think is very cool. So yeah, this was fantastic. I gave Not Quite a Ghost 5 stars, and it might be my new favorite Anne Ursu book. Yeah, I thought it was excellent. Next, I actually reread the original story, The Yellow Wallpaper, by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. As I said, I have reread this several times at this point, and I was getting ready to reread it again for a virtual book club that I'm in, and I decided that I wanted to read Not Quite a Ghost first, so that I didn't have the original coloring my impression of it too much. But yeah, this is, as I said, a very well-known feminist psychological horror story. We are following a young woman who is, I mean, we're following her perspective, like first person diary style narration, of her just like slowly just deteriorating mentally, because she is suffering from what we would now recognize as postpartum depression, and at the time, one of the accepted cure basically was complete isolation. So her husband essentially like locks her up in her room and doesn't let her see anybody, doesn't let her leave, doesn't let her read or write or anything. And the writing and the viewpoint we get of what is happening to this woman and what she is going through, I think is incredibly chilling, very well written. I mean, just the like laser focused word choice of this story is something that just hits me every time I reread it. Like nothing is wasted, no detail is a throwaway. I just am really impressed with it. I think the amount of depth in this very short story is very impressive. I definitely think that as a psychological horror, it really, really works. I think especially if you are a woman yourself, or just in some other way, you can connect to some of the feelings of the main character. I think that gives it like an extra kind of oomph as far as the horror goes. I also want to mention that this time I listened to this on audio for the first time, and I listened to the one narrated by Erin Ewan, and it is excellent. I think she really, really nails how terrifying it is to just follow this woman as she, you know, I don't want to give stuff away, but like through the course of the story, to follow her as this happens is very effective, and I think that Erin Ewan did a great job of communicating that. She is very selective about the parts of the narration that she performs in a way that is very like under emotive, and it is so frightening the way that like we hear this woman talk about the things that her husband is keeping her from, that she is locked in her room, that she can't see her child, that she's not allowed to read or write, that she's not allowed to see anybody. Like all of these things piling up that are frightening, and at the very least are some red flags. And then she'll kind of pull herself back and be like, but John loves me. Like it's very, like the roboticness of it, I think, is very effectively used. I think that the feminist commentary of the story and the way that it intersects with like illness and mental illness specifically, I think it really holds up. So I gave it 4.5 stars, and yeah, I still get something out of it every time I reread it. Next, I finished An Unlikely Proposition by Rosalind Eves. This is a companion book to An Improbable Season, which I reviewed, I think, in the previous wrap-up. And I received this in exchange for an honest review. I will link that review below. And so I wanted to read the first book before I read this one, and like I said before, I do recommend, if you are interested in both, reading them in that order. But yeah, so we are following one of the characters from the first book, and I can't really get into details because of spoilers. And then we are also following a young woman named Eleanor, who is a very young widow. She grew up very poor, she didn't have a lot of options, and so when she gets the opportunity to marry this older, wealthy man, she takes it, and he's very kind, they get along pretty well, but it's not like a love match or anything. And unexpectedly, he actually gets very, very sick and dies almost right after their wedding. And so Eleanor is left very wealthy, very young, and widowed. And so she's kind of just like making her own choices, living her life. Like, she just wants to have fun. So she's in London for the season, not looking for a relationship, just like wanting to be a 17-year-old girl. And then she ends up actually taking on the other main character, this other young woman, as her companion. And so they're like the two main characters that we follow. Eleanor actually ends up arranging a fake engagement because a relative of her late husband is trying to pressure her to basically give the money over to him, and she can stop that, or she can at least buy herself some time if she is engaged to somebody else. So this sounds like it's going to be like the fake engagement trope, but it's actually kind of a subversion of that, which I love, a fake relationship or like marriage of convenience trope. But I also really liked this version, which is that the character that she is like in the fake engagement for is actually somebody else's love interest. And I really liked the way that was done. I found the plot of this one very interesting. I thought the family was like really well developed. There's like one character where like I could not stand them, but they were well written. Just the characterization in general, I am finding I really click with the way that Rosalind Eves does it. I really enjoyed our main characters, especially Eleanor. I just love her. I have such a soft spot for her. She's clever and brave, and you really understand why she's so determined not to live without security again. And I felt a lot of sympathy for her. I thought her backstory was worked into the story really well without like dragging down the pace or anything. And also there is a romantic relationship involving her as well, and I really liked that too. It's somebody who, like, her social standing is seen as being above his, so there are reasons that they shouldn't really get involved, but of course it's more complicated than that. Yeah, I really liked this one. I didn't like it quite as much as the first book, and that's because I wanted more time with the love interests. Like, I really, really loved the interactions between our protagonists and the romantic leads, and I wanted more of that. I really liked the building of their relationship, and I just would have wanted, you know, more time on that, more scenes between them. But I did still really enjoy this, and I gave an Unlikely Proposition 4.5 stars. Again, check out my review for more thoughts. Next, I read an absolutely stunning picture book, and that is Aloha Everything, by Kaylin Malia George, illustrated by May Waite. And this is one that I backed on a Kickstarter, actually. I'm not sure if it is more widely published now. If it is, I'll try to find some information about that below. But this is just stunningly beautiful. So it is by Native Hawaiian creators, and it is of course set in Hawaii, and it is about like Hawaiian culture and practices and storytelling, and it's just got so much love for the land and for where this young girl lives. And I said on my Goodreads review that like any spread of this picture book could be like the big finish, you know, like if you've read picture books where there's like one or two just really like splashy, gorgeous like illustrations to kind of end the book, like any of these could be that. I thought this was absolutely stunning. Yeah, 5 stars, beautiful. And then finally, the last book I have to talk about today is Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. I actually listened to this on audio. The narrator was Beth Eyre. I thought she did a really excellent job, especially I noticed her voices for the male characters I thought were really, really good. Like probably one of the best that I've heard, because I feel like sometimes women narrating men or men narrating women, it's like there's a variation in quality, but I thought she did a great job. So this is a historical fiction myth retelling, female-centered myth retelling, and it is of course about Atalanta, who is very famously the only female Argonaut. So she was the only woman who went along on the adventure to get the Golden Fleece, like Jason, you know, his big quest and everything, and she was the only woman on board. And so we see her like childhood, her growing up. She ends up being abandoned in the woods by her family, and she gets taken in by the nymphs. So she spends a lot of time with the nymphs and with Artemis, and she grows up in the woods just really happy and like running free and like becoming actually an incredibly good runner, very fast runner, and she also learns to hunt, and she has all of these skills that serve her very well when she does end up becoming one of the Argonauts. And so we also follow that journey. We follow a little bit of the time after, and there's like, another famous story involving Atalanta and some apples. And so we see where that goes as well. So I had really enjoyed Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, but I was slightly more hesitant about this book just because I feel like I've been burned before. Like, as somebody who has read a lot of historical fiction, a lot of retellings, a lot of like supposedly feminist retellings, like some of them are excellent and then some of them I feel like are less so. And I was a little bit worried about the sort of like bland like warrior girl feminism that I feel like a lot of those stories can kind of fall into, which, not that there's anything wrong with being a warrior girl, but there are ways to write it in a way that is nuanced and thoughtful and like not hating on girls, and I feel like this book really did that. Like, I was really impressed with how Atalanta was characterized and how it was so clear that like she really loves these, like physical pursuits and being really like physically strong and being a good fighter and a good runner, but at no point does that like undercut like women who do other things, who are good at other things. And that also makes sense because like she grows up with the nymphs. So like it would be kind of ridiculous if she grew up thinking that the only way to be a strong, intelligent woman is to be like this one specific thing. And I just really liked Atalanta in general, just as a main character in her own right. I really admired her strength and her determination, and how determined specifically she was to prove herself to all of these men who thought that she couldn't do it. I liked how capable and competent she is, how smart she is. I think some of the relationships in this book are really, really interesting, even if they are very messy. And I was surprisingly into like the overall plot of this book, like the adventure part of them being on the Argo. Like, I hate road trip stories and I hate stories set on ships. So the fact that I was so engaged in this book, I think, is a huge testament to Jennifer Saint's writing, and probably to Beth Eyre's narration as well. I also really liked the way that Jennifer Saint took certain elements of the story, like the thing about the apples near the end especially. I really like how that was done. I think that she had a very difficult balancing act to do as far as like using these very iconic moments from the stories about Atalanta, but also putting her own spin on it, like fitting it into the story that she was telling. There was also this added, I feel like, pressure that she had to show that sometimes it's not just one thing or another. Like, characters can, like, people can have like multiple like experiences or be happy in multiple ways and things like that. I don't think that was helpful at all. I really enjoyed this overall. The only thing is there were some directions that the story went in, and I don't know, some of the stuff surrounding that I didn't care for, but I don't really feel like I can, I don't know, take off too many points for that, because like Jennifer Saint was working from specific like source material, and I feel like the way that she handled those plot points was actually a lot better than I have seen other authors do with kind of similar things. So I don't know, I'm kind of conflicted on some of it because it's not like her fault, but there were parts of this that I liked a lot less than others. But in general, I was very pleased with this. I gave Atalanta 4 stars. I definitely think that the way that Jennifer Saint centers women in these mythological retellings, and like the way that she handles that, like the nuance that she gives these female characters, the fact that her book's feminism is not dependent on hating other women, I just am really liking that. I'm looking forward to reading more. So 4 stars for Atalanta. Okay, I only realized after filming that I forgot to say something that I was going to mention during my review of Atalanta, and it has like no bearing on the actual story or my review or like, you know, my thoughts on it, but I feel like I had to say this because I thought it was so hilarious. Every time Atalanta would sort of like look around or think about like the all-star cast of the Argo, you know, she's like, we've got like sons of Ares, sons of Zeus, we have these famous heroes, we have Hercules, like we have like all of these like incredible like famous like adventurers and athletes, like even the people that she personally really doesn't like. She's like, wow, this is like a really just top tier group of heroes. And also Jason is here. Like, for some reason. Like, it was very much like, who put this guy in charge of the group project? Like, that is just hysterical to me. 10 out of 10. No notes. Okay, so those were the rest of the books that I read in March. Please comment down below. Let me know any of your thoughts on these. I feel like I had a couple of really big hits in this one, plus a pleasant surprise or two. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!